Hey, welcome back to Anthem. It is our series about worship. It's about time, right? So let's get right into it and start off with this. We can worship anything. I know we already kind of talked about that last week, but again, we can worship anything. So we'll unpack this right now. Whether it's devoting our thoughts and feelings to a boyfriend or girlfriend, or dreaming or talking about money like constantly. Remember, it's all can be worship because it's giving differential treatment or attention to someone or something, right? In other words, we praise or admire and show respect on this level that we wouldn't to an average person. And I wanted to do a clarification this week because I think I needed to. We didn't really mention this last week, but every time you honor, thank, or praise someone for an achievement, it's not necessarily worship. Okay, like I'm going to be honest about that, and that's not what God is saying in the Bible either. What He's saying is it's this what the word means is that it's this type of honor or praise that someone gets because they're next level, right? Like if they were in the room standing next to you or standing or with you or standing next to you, like it would change the way you act or the things you say. You would change who you are for them. See that level of treatment, praise and admiring them is next level. It's different than everybody else. It's worship. So why do we worship God? We worship God because, well, we remember what He's done for us. We worship because, honestly, we talked about this last week, we were made to. And this week we're talking about because God has done things for us that no one else could or has, maybe. The Psalms are full of these examples and truths. And before we take a look at one of them, I wanted to ask you, what has God done for you at any time in your life? And while you're thinking about that, I want to read Psalm 116. It says this: I love the Lord because he heard my voice. He heard my cry for mercy. Because he turned his ear to me, I will call on him as long as I live. Bottom line, God did something for him, and he said, I'm gonna worship you. I'm gonna call on you. I'm gonna acknowledge you for the rest of my life because it has changed my life. Psalm 106, 7 and 8, you should really look it up. 106 verse 7 and 8 talks about how that writer, that psalmist was saying, hey, like, I remember what God's done for me and my family. And it's changed my life too. And I'm going to worship God for it. So what are our reasons to worship God? Here's a couple of them really simply. Number one, he's a creator who cares. Genesis 1, chapter 1, the whole thing, and a lot of Genesis chapter 3 talk about this. God created the heavens and the earth, and basically everything on it too, is how the whole Bible starts. And God in Genesis chapter 3 gave Adam and Eve the clothing they needed after sinning and struggling with the discomfort of being naked. He did it even after everything else. So number two, a creator who provides deserves thanks, right? And the kind that is worship because he's different than everyone else. I mean, if you're going to worship anything, it makes sense for it to be God, doesn't it? And we should thank God if he does something for us. If you have any level of respect or any decency or manners in your life, you thank people for things that they do for you. Why would that be any different with God? But again, it's next level because he's not like anybody else, right? I mean, let's back this up and think about it. Worshiping an object or a person falls short of being worthy of it, right? Like, I mean, think about it. Like, there's still someone or someone greater than each of those things. I mean, whether it's a cell phone or your clothes, money, or LeBron James, like we talked about last week, they all have a creator. There's still someone greater. Why would any of us waste our time devoting any of our worship to anything less than God? And we're going to shift gears here, but to really be talking about the same thing. I've noticed that we have this tendency to worship God when things are hard. We come to him and acknowledge him that he's the one who can help us. But a life of worship or worship lifestyle includes when things are good. Like James 1:17 says, God provides good things. Like he's the one who gives us the good things we have in our lives. So honestly, we should respond with a big thank you to God. So the question is, do you give God credit when things are good? And if so, how? I was thinking about some of this. For me, it's telling a friend or somebody, a stranger even, about God and the ways he's been good and done stuff for me in my life. You could write a thank you note or a letter in a journal to God, paint a picture, pray and say thanks. And ultimately, we should live a life in a way that's honoring to God. The book of Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, all talk about that throughout the entirety of those letters, about this worthy life, this worship life we should live to God. Worshiping God has a return on it too. That's one of the perks of doing this thing and worshiping God. We're lined up with our true selves in nature when we're worshiping. Remember back to Romans chapter 12, verse 1, it talks about that. God often visits us in our worship too. Like, will talk to us when we're singing or when we're praying or any of that. And I'll read this verse here in a second, but God, by worshiping God, we actually can avoid destructive things in our lives. Romans 12, verse 2 says this: do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. See, this is still a conversation about worship because the verse right before it, which we talked about last week, is all about worship. And now our lives should be worship to God. And this is just a continuation of that. And he says when we're dialed in to worshiping God, we connect with him. But it's more than that. You and I will enjoy good, satisfying, and perfect things in God's will. And in this lifestyle of worship. That is the true and proper worship talked about in the previous verse. And I wanted to add this because we should make mention of it at some point in our conversation here about worship. This is why we sing in church.